To order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Here.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Here.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Here.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Here.
Dr. Nathan Goetz. Mr. Don Hilbinger.
Here.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Here.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Here.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
I just wanted to announce Mr. Goetz has class this evening, so he's unable to attend. Mr. Butterbaugh is tied up with a work commitment, so that he will not be here this evening.
Okay. Get an approval for the agenda.
Fred Scott, I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Mr. Don Hilbinger.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Agendas are up here if you need them. There's agendas right there.
We got one citizen here. We got a comment from you.
Actually, yeah.
Darren Donovan, 108 McCullough Road. I'm a resident of the district. I didn't get a chance to look over the agenda. I just wanted to comment on the concert last night. I think that was awesome. I don't know if anybody got a chance to be here. But I think Mr. Wilson did a great job. It was really cool to see the students and the effort they put into that. He made a mention of hiring an assistant for him, and he said the district can't afford that. So I don't know where that all falls into what we're going to talk about tonight, but just want to, in my opinion, how important it is for the people in this district, making sure that we can get the right people to do the job, and having quality people here. I think that the facilities are very important, but also, in my opinion, what's more important is the people that we have here in the community. Just keep that in mind when discussing the budget items. Also talked to a teacher outside of this district recently, and the potential of her coming here. Again, she said, I don't know if they can afford me. So again, I keep hearing this over and over again. Like I'm wondering why that's the narrative for this district, and what can we do to afford the people that we may actually need here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Donovan, if I could take an opportunity, the comment regarding teachers' salary, as you know, recently we did complete a new contract for the teachers, a 4-year contract, which we're proud of. And through that process, we analyze what our rates are for teachers and compare that to surrounding districts. And I can tell you we're very competitive with surrounding districts. So proud to say, actually, as far as teacher salaries are concerned, and the rate at which our teachers get to that top salary is we're on the upper end of that with other regional school districts.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I'm turning it over to you now. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, we're here this evening to have a Budget and Finance Committee meeting, and Mrs. Lentz has prepared a thorough and entertaining
I don't know about that.
budget presentation. And so I will hand it over to her.
All right, good evening. So on the agenda we have this evening, just to keep an eye on the major revenues sources by month. So I have updated those revenue sources to show what April revenues have brought in, as well as to quickly review level up funding. There was some questions about that from a previous meeting. Looking at some of our current economic developments and what that could potentially mean for the district, as well as looking at updated revenues, expenditures, and then an overall proposed final budget. So starting with our major revenues, current real estate, we've been monitoring that pretty much all year long. So we should be done. We should have collected all of our current real estate taxes. The only caveat to that, I will say, sometimes if we have like a tax assessment appeal where a refund may be due or we are to receive more money in, we could potentially either pay out or receive more money, but this is a pretty concrete number. So you can see through March of 2022, we collected just a little over $24 million. We're about 6.7% where we were above this time last year. And then down below, you can see the annual budget. So for the annual budget, we budgeted just over $23.6 million. So you can see the year-to-date revenue collected is about $400,000 above what we budgeted for. And the next one we've been monitoring is realty transfer tax. And, you know, last year and this year, it's been quite high, especially this year. We have had a lot of either large properties sell or just the volume of number of properties that have been selling is quite higher than what we've seen in the past. So as you can see, through March of 2022, we've collected just a little over $1.7 million in realty transfer tax. And when you look at where we were last year at the same time period at about $541,000, we're about 217% last year. So again, another windfall in this current year's budget. When you looked at, we only had budgeted $450,000.
May I ask a question? Is that just one time, or that's increased every year?
No, we're kind of like in a high right now. I don't foresee, I'm not a specialist in this
Yeah.
area, but I don't believe year over year that we can budget 1.7 million. I believe eventually when the market drops and things start to slow down, this revenue will slow down as well.
All right.
So it's not reoccurring.
Okay.
I mean, some of it is, but the high trends will not be reoccurring. And then as far as our earned income tax, year-to-date, we received a little over $4.2 million. We're about 7% above where we were last year at the same time period. We had only collected in about $3.9 million. And you can see year-to-date, we have annually budgeted $5.2 million. But I believe if we continue on this trend for the last several months of the year, I believe we're going to end up above the $5.2 million budget mark as well.
Christie, one question. Again, this is vague memories, but it seemed like we would even get some in July and August after cap tax. Used to be some big sums, but I don't know if that's still the case or not.
Yeah, so we don't, the way we have to account for it, yes, there are revenues, same way expenditures that come in after June 30th. And that's when you use your accounting methods where, like, if you receive revenue that was for, like, say in July for the previous year, it gets put back to the previous school
Right.
year. So when you look at the June numbers, that actually includes any revenue we receive after
okay.
June, but gets put back in the previous fiscal year.
All right.
Excuse me, what do you mean? I'm not know more about it. What do you mean puts back in the previous year?
So let's just say in July, we received revenue for earned income tax, but that earned income tax was actually collected in June, so it should be accounted for in the 2021 fiscal year. Accounting-wise, we will post those dollars into the 21-22 accounting year. We won't account for them in the new fiscal year. We keep, as much as we can, we keep the revenues and expenditures for the year that they're attributed to in that accounting year.
So that's mostly accounting, yeah?
Yes. So I wanted to provide the board with just a little bit more information on Level Up. We did hear Mrs. Spica also give some information at Monday night's board meeting. So for the 21-22 school year, Shippensburg School District received just a little over $265,000 in Level Up funding. And again, like she had said, and I'll reiterate, that does get added to our base. That does not go away. So that was included in our revenue numbers for this budget. And then I just wanted just as a comparison there of what Governor Wolf has proposed for 22-23. He proposed a little over $796,000 at this point. As we know, the state has not set the budget, so we have no idea yet what the legislature will fund compared to what the governor has proposed. But I'm not going to read in detail, but down below is a little bit further of an explanation of how that formula is calculated. And I think Mrs. Spica hit the high points that they take into account It's kind of like a mixture of our BEF formula and our special education formula to come up with the level up amount. And so, moving on to the next page, again, I'm not going to go into details, but if you just want to see all the data that PDE uses to calculate this, I had to put it in 3 different rows to be able to fit on the slide, but it just, or 4, I guess, 4 different rows. But I won't read every one, but you can see how they come up with the numbers. They're using poverty weights, they're using English language learner weights, they're using SEF, like special education student count weights, they're using like our expenditures and dividing it over those student count weights. So it's very extensive formula that PDE uses to run that additional funding through for the level up funding. And then just a quick highlight, if you were interested, of where did Shippensburg fall for the current school year compared to the other 100 districts that got this level up supplement. I have that list below, and I highlighted Shippensburg in green, so you can see for the 21-22 school year, we ended up as number 52 in the list. And I know there was concerns, they asked from a board member at a previous meeting, could we potentially drop off the list? And yes, school districts can come on and off the list based on updated data points, so your poverty, your ELL, your student counts. So yeah, there is a chance that from year to year, if the state continues to fund through this formula, that districts can fall off the list. But as Mrs. Spica said, currently, if the legislature sticks with the current funding formula, it looks that we may have dropped to 72 on the list, but appears that hopefully we will remain on that list for 22, 23, again, if the legislature puts funding through this formula.
So the schools behind us are in worse shape than we are? Is that what you're saying?
I would say the schools 1 through 51 are in worse shape than us.
Wow. It's hard to believe we're even on that list.
Well, let me just say this, you know, what this level up funding is a list of the 100 school districts in Pennsylvania out of 500 school districts in Pennsylvania that are in need of additional help based on one or more of these criteria that Christy just went over. And I believe probably the main reason we're on the list is because our aid ratio. The fact is, whether we would like to say it or not, we're actually a poor school district. I don't think there's another Cumberland County school district on the level up list. I don't believe there's another Franklin County school district on the list. In fact, the only neighbor we have that's on the list other than us is Fannett Metal. And so the fact is we're an underfunded or relatively poor school district. In fact, we saw some information before that our spending, I believe we're number 488 out of 500 school districts. There's almost nobody that spends less per student than Shippensburg. In fact, the number showed, I think, to the state average, we needed another $15 million a year, every year, to spend on the state average per student. We'd need $18 million a year. $18 million more every year to spend on par with Big Spring School District.
And this year, we could only get 800,000 tops through taxing to the index, so we can't get there by taxing either. So it's not because of the taxes that we're in that position.
Well, that's one of the reasons, and that's one of the reasons that the economic development that was begun by some members of this board many years ago when Procter & Gamble came, that sort of primed the pump for other economic development. Those big boxes, whether we recognize it or not, are critical to finding the money to be able to support our school district. You just, I don't think you're ever going to get home waiting for the state. We haven't so far, and certainly we aren't able to do it on the backs of the average taxpayer in the home. So the economic development is critical if we want to be able to invest in the future in schools.
But eventually, that's going to come to an end. Is there a way to prepare for the future for our school district? We know we can't do taxes, and warehouse is going to wear out. Is there a way that we can prepare?
Well, I would say, you know, we're limited by taxation. Certainly, another factor is, you know, if you look historically, if I think the term has been used, of, you know, leaving money on the table, and where you, certainly we're limited by the amount that we can tax, but if we don't take that amount, you never get that back. And so that compounds year after year after year. So whenever that's occurred, that certainly doesn't help. But again, to the point, it's not just taxation, it's also state funding and appropriate funding. So we are underfunded by the state. If you also look at the, you know, tax equalization between counties, I think that also hurts us. So there are a number of factors that really play into the fact that the sign is, as pointed out, being 488 out of 500 for student spending, there are a number of factors that point to that, but the bottom line is we don't have the funds that we should have to be able to appropriately support our students in the district.
So if land wasn't an issue and we had enough room, right now, I was reading an article today, it was, so public school enrollment decreased 5%, while special education raised almost 18%. Is it possible, our STAR program is a great program, other districts also have needs to allow students from other districts to come here with services that we have available as a revenue resource? I mean, special education, I mean, with those trends, like I am worried about it because I want to ensure that the budget is aligning with those upward trends in special education, but also knowing that we have a lot of amazing staff and programs that, you know, to welcome other students here and utilize those services.
Right, and certainly we're open to doing that. We belong to a special education consortium, and so as part of that consortium, we're able to send, if we need to, our student to a district, a neighboring district that has the resources or has a program in place to be able to support them that we may not. But likewise, if we have a program in place that they can utilize, we certainly can do that and share those resources. A good example of that, as part of the budgeting process, we talked about adding an additional ABA classroom next year for the primary grades at James Byrd Elementary School. So that's a good example of, if for some reason we have empty slots and we can share that out, we're able to reap the benefits of that revenue from other districts who might have a need.
And so is that a set rate, or can we set the amount, like the costs per student to come here?
It's established through the consortium so that we're able to provide those services at a more economical cost than if you were to go to an outside agency or send them to a specialized school. And you know, for the most part, it ends up being a wash where you have a student who maybe you're sending out for one program, or another student who you're bringing in to your district for that program. So it's not, I would say, it's not usually a direct moneymaker, but more or less a trade of services is where you really see the benefit.
Yeah, so
There's a
bartering, so
savings there.
you're not still paying an outrageous amount for,
We're not paying the premium
yes.
price, yes.
Is it possible that we could have someone from the State Tax Equalization Board to come in and have a little work session with the board?
I would love that. I can tell you, I am not an expert in the when you sit in multi-county school districts and the equalization. And I don't know if Dr. Seppo can help, but I will say, in my time here, I have tried to reach out to PDE and ask them to come in, not just for me, but for you guys, as well as PASBO. And I just haven't seemed to have any takers on somebody coming and explaining it in more detail to myself and the board.
We're happy to try and reach out and see if we can dig up an expert to be able to provide additional resources or to be able to come in and sort of walk us through at a high level. I think that would be helpful because we're not experts. It's very complicated, as you can see from some of the data that was even presented for the Level Up funding and the state tax equalization and how that's created, and what the effects of that might be as we are a multi-county district. I think it would be very beneficial.
Well, on one hand, I'm sure there's nothing wrong there, and on the other hand, I continue to be troubled almost out of my mind, by the fact that we sit in two counties, and so we never get the full impact of any tax increase. We assign the tax increase to the county where you can get the money, the other county floats, and so, for example, if Big Spring has an index of 4.5 and they tax to 4.5, they get 4.5 across the board. We never do. We only ever get about half of it. And if there's and on one hand, I'm sure it's fair and correct, and on the other hand, if there's a systemic problem, that we're dying from,
Right.
then I'd like to figure it out.
Right. I agree. I'd like to believe it's fair and correct, but I also question whether it is fair and correct.
Which county are we being shortchanged?
It fluctuates from year to year.
I keep
I
hearing
feel
that.
like on average, I feel like Franklin County usually pulls us down. But let me give you the example here. So for the current upcoming school year, 22-23, Cumberland County hits that index first. So our adjusted Act 1 index of, oh my goodness, I don't have it memorized now, I'm trying to find it. What is it, 4.5%. So again, Cumberland County hits the index first at 12.6163 millage rate. But then for the county to equalize it, it says, okay, Shippensburg, you can only tax Franklin County residents a millage rate of 97.1936. However, if they weren't equalizing those mills, the max millage rate of the index we could actually go, if we just sat in Franklin County alone, we could go up to 104.0962. So let me tell you, what does that mean in dollars?
Yeah.
So in dollars right now, where we can only tax, if we go to the index up to, I'm just gonna say about 97, that brings in just a little over $10.3 million. But if we could go up to the 104, we could bring in 11.1 million. So, $700,000 to $800,000.
For example, you showed us a chart, and I don't have it with me, but just remind us, what's the millage rate in Franklin County, and what was the millage rate 10 years ago?
Well, I didn't bring that with me either.
Not much different.
No,
I was going to say, I know we've done a historical look back, and there's very little difference. I know last year when we were looking at raising taxes to the index, I actually believe that Franklin County residents were paying less.
yeah, I still think they might be
Based on
paying
average
less
assessed home.
Well,
than they were at one point.
I recall some discussion a year or so ago, but in the last budget, I think Franklin County got, they got the brunt of the tax increase. I think the index was assigned to them. So whatever that index was, they went to 4.5%, but if which was a little shocking. But if you look at the previous year, they got a reduction of 8% or 8 or 9%. So between the 2 years was a wash. The millage rate is very similar today to what it was 10 years ago when Cumberland County got the reassessment.
But we don't control that. The county commissioners control that, correct?
That's correct.
What did you say, the county
County commissioners control it.
commissioners do?
Yeah,
do they?
I think they assess the houses.
For reassessment, there has to be.
Reassessment, yeah, but
Has
not
to
the STEB equalization.
Oh, no.
That's the State Tax Equalization Board.
Yeah,
Reassessment, there has to be an agreement.
But I'm saying
between
about-
all member school districts and
they don't
the county.
appraise or reassess their houses up. We can't, that money don't go up, right? My understanding.
I believe I've been told in a reassessment that it's supposed to, again, equalize, I don't know, Dawn, help me. It's supposed to equalize what they're currently paying. Like, they're not going to pay any more.
Supposedly, when a reassessment goes through, the county that did the reassessment, their millage rate is supposed to drop equal to whatever the assessment went up.
So it should be 100,
Yeah,
not 100.
yeah.
So you get no more dollars. The dollars remain equal.
Oh,
But again, I don't know if that hurts us. That's why I wanted a little bit more information from the state about this whole multi-county and equalization. Is it hurting us because, Franklin County hasn't reassessed? I don't know. no.
It doesn't?
Only on an individual basis. That's what's famous about Franklin County. There's never been, since
a
1960 or something,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
The 60s evaluation.
We're not the only school district in 2 counties, are we?
No, I forget how many there are across the state. I feel like it's still a fairly small number, but I can tell you Franklin County is one of them. Or not Franklin County, I'm sorry. Fannett Meadow is one of them. Fannett Meadow sits in Franklin and Perry County.
Oh,
And Franklin, or Fannett Meadow, the majority of theirs is Franklin County. I forget from when I worked there. It's a very small percent that sits in Perry County. But my counterpart that replaced me when I left, we talk from time to time. And he's like, yeah, I just want to petition. We'll educate the Perry County students, but like West Perry School District can have the tax revenue because they're losing out too. They can't go to the index on the Franklin County side.
Okay.
thank you.
So that brings us to our next slide, economic developments. And so, we know that we are going to be getting a casino in our district. And so I had started to do some research regarding, is there any new revenues available to the school district? So before I go potentially new revenues, let's back up. At one time when the casino was coming in, they're going to build a brand-new casino, new property, that would have brought us in additional current real estate tax revenue. But now they have chosen to occupy part of the old Lowe's warehouse building. So could we get some revenue from that, additional revenue? Potentially, I don't know what that would be. Once that renovation is complete, the county will go out and assess it, and they'll say, okay, as a warehouse, it was valued at this, but now a casino, it's valued at this. We might get a little bit, but not a substantial amount like we would have if it would have been a whole brand-new property. So then I started to say, well, is there any other revenue we could get? You see in Act 1511, there's amusement tax, mechanical device tax. So I started to do some research, and I've been getting conflicting information. I started with my professional organization, PASBO. One member there said, no, we can't. Another member said we can. Then I reached out to PDE. PDE said absolutely not. So then I reached out to our district solicitor, and our district solicitor is saying he believes that we can enact a new tax under the mechanical device tax. And I'm still waiting for additional information from our solicitor, but want to highlight some of the stuff that he said to me. He said that a mechanical device tax may be collected as either a flat or percentage of gross receipts from each mechanical device, which is slot machines. In regards to the next steps in this process, in order to enact this tax, a resolution must be passed by the board, and the tax itself must be advertised, and it must be done during the usual time period in which the district levies other school taxes. And so during that time, we're going to have to advertise for 3 weeks in a newspaper that potentially if the board wants to enact a new tax, and the estimated revenue. So at this point, our solicitor is still trying to get his hands on a draft resolution to share with me that I can bring forth to the board. But at this point, as far as additional revenue, what that would bring in, I do not have that information at this point. But I will continue to provide updates as I receive updates on that as well. And then, as you can all see, that Patriot Federal Credit Union is building a new branch right up here beside Kressler's Wise Market. So the estimated completion date for that project is early to mid-May. With that timeline, I don't know the exact date, but the county will cut off its assessed values sometime in May. So if this completion isn't done until after the county cuts that off, then what will happen is we will get interim assessed revenue in 22-23, and then it'll go on our books as full revenue in the following year, 23-24. So as I continue to monitor that, I'll let you know what that means for us and potentially how much we will receive. I did do a little bit of legwork. I'm stretching this, so what I did is I went out and I said, okay, we have some other banks in our district premise boundaries. So F&M, that's down by the Starbucks, the Planet Fitness at that end of town, they bring in $4,788 per year in annual tax revenue. So kind of as an estimate, you know, if that's about the same size building, I'm just saying potentially that right around that could be our annual revenue, but I won't know until the county assesses it. And then we also heard from the Franklin County Area Development Corp. When we had that breakfast that that U.S. Express Trucking Company is currently doing an expansion of their facilities in Franklin County that's out by Procter & Gamble. And that project is estimated to be completed in early to mid-May as well. So again, you know, I'm not sure if we'll get the full value for next school year or if we'll end up getting an interim and then book the full value the following fiscal year. I'm not sure how much potential revenue this could bring in because I'm not sure how the county will assess what value they'll assess that completion at. But I can tell you, Mike Ross from the Franklin County Development Corp. Indicated to me that the initial capital investment for that expansion is $12 million. So I don't know if the county will take that $12 million capital expansion, if they'll take that and use the common level ratio to come up with the assessed value. That I am not familiar with, like how they determine the assessed value. But if they do something along those lines, I'm calculating maybe additional revenue of approximately $123,000. I don't know that for sure. I'm just trying to throw out some estimates. We'll truly have to wait till the county assesses that to see how much additional revenue per year that'll bring us. And then the next, as we can all see, there's another new warehouse going in off of the Fayette Street exit out by the new Walmart warehouse. I have not heard how big of a square footage of that is. Has any other members of the board know?
It's big.
I do know if I'll just give you this. I know the Walmart facility is like one of our biggest ones. And the Walmart that just came on our books, I think that was a little over 1 million square foot. So if that property is at similar size, that is bringing us in just under $900,000 annually. So obviously, this would not be built in time for the 22-23 year. The estimated completion is about halfway through next fiscal year. If that completion stays on task, that we could get anywhere from a half to a quarter year of interim revenue. So even if we want to just say, worst case scenario, give it a little bit of extra time so the project isn't delayed, we might receive about a quarter of that. So again, if it's the size of the Walmart facility, that could be additional $225,000 in interim. And then again, the following year, we would get the full value. Is there any other questions at this point? I will just continue to
Yeah.
monitor these.
That warehouse, I believe, is being built on spec. So when that happens, obviously, the developer's going to pay whatever taxes there are. But would the assessment change at all, do you know, after it gets sold to whoever ends up occupying it?
No, it usually does not get changed when the sale changes hands, okay?
Of course, it gets,
I believe
they're gonna rent it or
I
not.
believe it's typically based on certificate of occupancy.
Oh.
Would be
That-
the.
That's when
the
it goes on the
trigger.
books.
Now, if it's sold, there would be realty transfer.
Right, yeah, okay.
But I believe the trigger, is most likely
So
certificate.
until somebody actually occupies that building.
Occupancy.
Oh, no, certificate of occupancy.
Certificate, ready to go, yeah, ready to be occupied.
Does anybody know if there's going to be another warehouse out there? I think, isn't there one
So,
more?
yes, so, well, let me, I don't know exactly how many warehouses or additional commercial buildings we could get, but I did ask Mike Ross. Out near there, I forget who is occupying the building, but it's called United Business Park. And I forget how many lots are out there in United Business Park, but there are some still undeveloped lots in the United Business Park.
That's an extra 24.
So I'm asking, this is what I asked Michael Ross, I don't know why Lot 10, Lot 10 in United Business Park, do you know if this is in Shippensburg Area School District boundaries? Yes, it is. If so, you indicated it is approximately 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility. Yes, it is being marketed as a manufacturing facility. And I asked, do you know when the estimated completion date is and if they have a tenant for the facility? He said, CADC has issued a lease proposal to a prospect and is waiting their decision. Their decision to accept the proposal will determine the final construction plans and timing of the building completion date. Then I said, I know that there are several plots available in the United Business Park. Do you know if all plots are within SASD? Yes. Do you know how many plots are developed? How many are currently being developed and any future planned development, and how many are vacated left to be developed? And he said CADC controls a commercial lot of approximately 4 to 5 acres fronting PA 696, potential hotel and/or fast food location. The remainder of the park is controlled by Matrix Development, and their timing for development will be predicted on market demand. So that's all I can tell you at this point about, but there could be continued economic development out there.
696 restaurants.
Where?
Yeah, where'd that be?
The Hammond Farm, they sold it. It's, if you go on White Church Road, where Larry Whale lives, right past there, that old stone house that sit there,
Yeah.
that whole thing went there.
Oh,
They also got on the Maysville Road, everything behind, across from the old school, back in that, where it's all just wooded now.
where?
And behind where Hackman used to live.
Where's that again at Charlie? Where,
It was part of the McDonald farm, and part of it was Plaster's farm. They got, that's all ready for development. Big.
It's good news. We don't know exactly when, how much, but there's still room out there for development in the coming years.
And we'll continue to keep you posted as we know about additional economic developments. So that brings us to revenue changes. So since the last time we met in Budget and Finance, we had not updated revenues since the January 18th Budget and Finance meeting. So at that meeting, we presented total revenues at about $56.7 million. So since then, I have updated each county's assessed values. So I got an assessed value report from Cumberland County on April 4th and in Franklin County, April 6th. So I updated those assessed values, which will bring in an additional almost $175,000 just based on an increase in assessed value changes. We have heard from Mrs. Woodall that preliminary, the federal government is reducing our allocations in Title I and Title II, but increasing Title IV. So you can see from the preliminary projections about a 6.7% decrease in Title I, which equates to a revenue reduction of about $58,000. And then Title II, they're saying to reduce by 8.8%, or for us, about $11,000. And then Title IV to go up by 6.1%. That would bring in an additional approximately $4,000 in federal revenue. And then we built in raising taxes to the index, which would bring in just over $790,000. And at this point, room for discussion, but I know there was mention about putting in additional state funding at $1 million. So if we do that, that brings our total revenues to just over $58.5 million.
First question, remind me the Act One index cap.
4.5% for Shippensburg.
Number two, where is the level up funding? Is that embedded, is that hidden in that $1 million?
No.
Or is It's
So-
up top.
Yeah, so it's up top in the 56.6 million. I had put that in when I brought you the revenues back in January because we knew that was staying in our base. So in the revenues, I projected level state funding when we met on January 18th.
And what was in the governor's request for the additional state funding? Is that two?
So the $1 million is part of that governor's proposal, but let me read off what Governor Wolf had proposed. So for basic education funding, if we would get his full funding, that would be $1,981,330. Level up, $796,455.
But that's already up top.
No, that would be just in the additional state funding that you see down below at $1 million. I have not built in, except for that $1 million, I have not built in any other additional state funding.
She used the 220,000 we got this year.
Right.
Into that.
Not the 7.
Correct. So if
So that number was what, 7?
$796,455.
Got it.
And then for special education funding, $328,554. And if there would be a charter school reform, now this would hit our expense side, but again, it would net out. That's $154,967 savings. So in total, if we would get everything the governor proposed, $3,261,296.
Can you refresh me? What is Title I, Title II, and Title IV? What are they? Yeah.
I'm going to let Dr. Suppo speak to those programs.
Yeah, so the largest of the three is the Title I funding, which is improvement of reading and language arts, for the most part, reading and language arts for students who are underserved.
Okay.
The Title II and Title IV, I can send you a quick blurb that'll.
Oh, no,
explain all that.
I don't know, Title I, Title II,
Yeah.
I didn't know what it meant.
Title I's the biggest.
I wasn't looking at the money, I just wondered what it was for, but okay. No, you don't need to send me no email.
Okay. So just to go back over, so the additional state funding, what Christie did is based on the conversations we had at our last meeting, just over that $3.2 million is proposed in the governor's budget. We only inserted 1 million at this point. So that, based on what happens at the legislature, that could go up or down. But right now, we're sort of shooting, I think, at a conservative level, which we think is fair based on previous governors' proposals and what actually happens come June.
And I believe the board member that kind of had recommended this, I had said at a previous meeting that according to PASA, they said historically you get anywhere between 25 to 30% of what the governor proposed. So I believe that's why the $1 million was thrown out there as a placeholder to put into the revenues. And then when we met last time on March 21st, we had total expenditures at $61.3 million. And that did include the recommended staffing that we presented. So since then, I have included retirement savings, but then we also hired a new assistant middle school principal, and we had changes to middle school principal. So when you net all those changes out, I actually had to add about $7,600 to the budget. And then the business administrator with the Franklin County Area VOTEC has shared the preliminary budget with the sending school districts. Although the JOC has not voted on this budget yet, they believe that it's pretty likely that this will be the budget that gets approved. And if that's the case, we'll be able to remove about $10,000 from our expenses for the VOTEC line item. And then when I presented the budgets earlier, it didn't include when teachers have the ability to advance in salary based on receiving additional education credits. So building in all those salary advancements added just shy of $31,000 to the budget. And then for cyber charter schools, as you know, that is extremely high compared to where it was pre-pandemic. So pre-pandemic, we were, I believe, right around like 1.3 million. And with the pandemic, we're right around 2.7, 2.8 million, which we had put in the preliminary budget. We had put in what we are currently trending. But as we come back to more normalcy, for our students, and masking and all that, and social distancing has gone by the wayside, we're hoping to be able to attract some of those students back into the district. So hoping that we can attract those back in. We pulled out 1.2 million from the budget in hopes that we can attract those kids back in for the upcoming fiscal year. So with that, that brings our total expenditures to about $60.1 million.
The state is looking at refinancing or the budgeting on cyber schools, aren't they? I know you don't know, but that could affect this also, or the next budget.
Restructuring some of those costs, yes, there's a proposal.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know where that goes.
Yeah, I've seen that many times.
Is it possible that we could put together a team, perhaps administrators and teachers or whatever, but a small team to put together a package, a plan for how we're going to develop a plan and execute the plan to bring these students back in an effort to return this 1.2 million to the district? Some sort of official, sort maybe with some marketing, maybe it's something can be done over the summer, maybe it's something that perhaps.
I just did a quick calc, and that's like 70 to 80 students you're thinking of being able to bring back.
Well, it depends on if they're regular ed or special ed students, the cost.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. But it's still a pretty high number.
Yeah, I'd have to look to see what our current numbers are to see the actual student count. We can get that for you. I know last year we did an aggressive campaign. We attempted to make contact with every family that was in an outside program to make sure that they were aware that we have a program available to them within our district. And additionally, if they were interested, we were certainly welcoming and hoping that they would come back to the district. And we were able to get a few students. I think part of the problem was with this year, the uncertainty of what the year was going to look like. Certainly, I think August didn't help us as we had that increase in surge in COVID. Masks were still required. Social distancing was required. Eating in multiple areas in the cafeteria was different or not normal. So we're hoping a lot of those factors, now that we've really had somewhat of a normal year, that those factors will attract a number of students back. I would encourage our staff to make contact again this year to have that aggressive campaign. Are there other things that can be done, Mr. Burt? I'm certain. I don't think that it's, we should stop short, try everything that we can to attract those students back. But we are hopeful that, again, going back to some normalcy, that will, reduce those numbers significantly. What we would say is that caveat to this is, we're pulling that number out, which is a lot lower than where we're currently at. So as we progress through next year, if there are more students than what we've budgeted, then certainly that money would have to come out of fund balance to be able to support that. But at this point in the budgeting process, we feel like it's worth not including all of those expenditures.
Well, let me say a few things. And number one, I believe we certainly predicted a couple of years ago what I'm going to call unintended consequences from not being able to fully offer face-to-face delivery and so forth, and where we were essentially only able in some of our grades to offer a cyber option. And I believe that the unintended consequences of that are reflected right here in these numbers. I think it's really no surprise that if at least in a perceived way, that if all you're going to offer, all you're capable of offering at a particular point in time is a cyber version of school, then the families would look for what they would perceive to be the best version of that cyber school. So we certainly lost students in that process, and that's certainly their right. Now, let me say this. I don't know if $1.2 million is the right number to project, but certainly from a practical perspective, we shouldn't just expect to let it go. We shouldn't budget at 2.8. We should budget for some reduction, and we should put some folks together, task them with developing a plan. That's what you would do in any other place you are. How are you going to do it? How are you going to get those kids back? and you'd put together some kind of a comprehensive, plan for how we're gonna do it, and you'd get some folks charged up to do it, and I'd know what it is, and you'd know what it is, and the public would know what it is, and we'd advertise it. And we would make the best effort possible to put the best foot forward to get these students back. What the projection should be for bringing back, I don't know. 1.2 is very aggressive, and it might be too aggressive. What it really does is it probably, if it's too aggressive, to the extent it's too aggressive, it camouflages what your real deficit is.
I mean, we were given some figures at the last budget meeting. It looks like we had 175 students at external cyber charter schools. So we're basically looking at, looks like again, I'm only going off I just did a very rough calculation, but you're making a significant cut into that. Now, it had been half of that in pre-COVID, so.
Dr. Seppo, how many cyber students do we currently have, like outside of the district's virtual, like charter, like?
Outside cyber charter schools, the 175.
175.
Still, like, that hasn't came down? Normal, like returning, like with the normal, like hoping that they would come, students would return to the district after normalcy. We haven't seen a drastic drop so far.
So I would say that's 175 at a point in time. And where this gets a little bit complicated is you have a student who could go into a cyber school, they could be there for a short period of time and then come back in. You have a student who may have never been in a district school, who enrolls in the district or moves into the district and enrolls into a cyber charter school. You can have a student who was in a neighboring district that was in a cyber charter school and then moves into the district. So it's hard to look at that and say it's a one-for-one. Basically, that there were in 2019 there were 86 students, and now today there's 175. So that number is changing every month. We get the reports on the enrollment reports because that comes off of our basic education subsidy. The state takes that right off of that, or not basic ed. It comes off of our, go ahead.
No, we do not allow the state to
Okay.
pull from our basic ed. There are school districts that do that, and I think that's a dangerous move for those school districts because we reconcile those invoices on a monthly basis, and there are many adjustments that are made to those invoices because they're not billed correctly. So no, we do not, this school district has not, and I will say will not elect for it to come off the basic ed.
But ultimately it comes off of your basic ed. I mean, it comes off of what, the money you're going to get and you're spending it one way or the other. So I guess my point is that number is, again, a single point in time. It's always sort of going up and down.
Well, let me say this, and particularly since we now recognize that we are going to be going through some transition or whatever, I think that putting a group together and getting them assigned with the purpose of developing the plan, showing us what the plan is for how we're going to accomplish this, I think is, I'd like to see that. I think you do that anywhere you are. And then the other thing is that what this essentially does is it projects cutting in half, and that's probably might be too aggressive.
If half of the students come back, so let's say Dawn said 80 students, if they come back, how is that going to impact classroom sizes? Like, would we be prepared with staff if half of the charter students come back to the district?
I would have to look at where those students are as far as grade level and where they would be enrolled. I couldn't tell you sitting here today, but we would have to look at what that number was. Assuming that they would be somewhat evenly distributed across grade level, then I would say the impact wouldn't be too significant.
I don't know if that helps you. That's by building, it's not by grade level, but it's by.
But if they're out in cyber charter other than Keola, we can certainly provide a better education and do it at a significantly lower price.
Absolutely, and I think even if a student is or family for whatever reason wants to continue through a cyber program, doing that through the district's program, I think is a great advantage to them. The resources we have, the supports that we have. So whether it's come back to our building or come back into our cyber program, I think there's a tremendous advantage for families.
Dwayne, I would agree with your thought to put that team together. When I brought this up about the amount of students that we had that went to cyber charter, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or something at a regular board meeting, I talked to Sue Martin afterwards, and she'd said years ago, our assistant superintendent had building administrators kind of reach out and call students on a case-by-case thing, trying to get those students to come back. I think that's a good idea, but kind of taking it to the next level and getting more than just a building principal, get guidance counselors, or anybody else like you're mentioning involved. Reaching out, forming that team, I'm all in support of that. Because I think we got to sell our district, sell it how good I think we are, and get people to come back.
Well, you're exactly right, and there's absolutely no doubt that anywhere else you are in the world, if you're going to project some improvement that equates to $1.2 million, you'd put together a plan on how you're going to do it. There's no doubt we have hardworking people and so forth. Otherwise, all this is a trick. It shows it's a 1.2 million, and to the extent it's real, and it's real, but to the extent it's not real, that we don't accomplish it, then then that just falls into a deficit that we didn't recognize today and comes out of the fund balance at the end of this.
I think the other,
Sorry, do we have the people to do that, Don? I mean, our guidance counselors you'll tell us that the teachers and guidance counselors are boxed in. He keep putting loads on teachers and guidance counselors in the school district. Can we do this?
We have two cyber educators who, one at the elementary and one at the secondary level. And so that is a task that we provided them last year that they were able to accomplish. So I would say that's a good fit for this. But I think there are other things we can do as well. I mean, I think buying promotional items, sending some district gear, marketing, there are things of that nature that can be done to, any investment. Really, if you look at the numbers, any investment is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're losing $2.8 million to cyber charter.
And I will tell you,
And we used to only be, forever at about $1 million to 1.3 million. And when COVID hit, that's where the rest of it went. Not long ago. This isn't a lot like like 2 years ago, we were spending at $1 million forever and 1.3 million, and then COVID hit, and now we're spending 2.8. We lost them because we couldn't offer face-to-face delivery. This is the unintended consequences of keeping our schools closed.
I will tell you, this is not a Shippensburg problem. I mean, it's a statewide problem. Was in an email chain the other day with a number of superintendents in Cumberland County, and they're all still looking for the same thing. But it's a problem nonetheless. The other thing too that is the shameful, I'll say, unintended consequence of cyber charter schools is the accountability. The accountability is not there that we have for our students. And so and I'm not saying by any means that this applies to all families, but I'm just making the point that if you're not interested or in holding your student accountable, and whether that be, grades, behavior, getting work done, completed, on time, handed in, attendance, yes. All of those factors, a great way to get out of that is go to cyber charter school. And that happens quite a bit. We see that significantly. So, as where we're held accountable, and we need to have students here at school, and we're held accountable with our PSSA test results and our achievement test results, and we're held accountable with our disciplinary in a district. Those are an easy way to shift that, or to move away from that, or get away from that, escape that, is to go to a cyber charter school. So that's another problem that's difficult to deal with. The accountability is not there.
This is protected for next year, right? This budget here?
Correct.
Dawn, you said something last meeting, that you're going to have a meeting with SEPTA or SEPA? Did you say a personnel meeting, going to have a meeting with somebody?
I'm drawing a blank.
I thought they said, but I'm asking, the act, you having a meeting, has the Act 93 people you've been discussing, is that over?
So yes, we have been discussing the Act 93 agreement. I met with Dr. Goetz. I had a phone conversation with him today. I know the subcommittee has been working on that, and so we're sort of finalizing that proposal to hopefully bring it back to the board soon.
But that's not included in the budget yet.
That is not included in the budget.
Okay.
Any increased expenditures is not included in the budget for Act 93.
Contracted people within the school district, is that included in this or not yet?
The teachers' contract is.
Okay.
We are still working on the support staff negotiations, so I would not want to comment on that.
Yeah, I understand that personnel, but I'm just looking at what I've heard, what's coming up that we're discussing, because Dwayne's brought up the point about our economics, our pay rates scale is so low, we want to keep people, we got to increase that. So I'm just wondering if it's included in this or not.
I would want to talk about that in an executive session.
Okay, I know it's supposed to be, but I talked to somebody who's supposed to take care of it and they didn't do it. So that's why I'm just asking preliminaries now, not you.
Yeah, I understand. So we will have an executive session directly after today's meeting, and I'll be happy to address that question.
Okay, so where does that bring us? Based on the total revenue shown this evening, again, at just over 58.5 million, and revised expenditures at 60.1 million, that brings our deficit down to just over 1.5 million. Using, as we have in the past, a little bit of fund balance towards the PSERS retirement contribution increase of about 78,000, recommending at this point for the proposed final to show the use of fund balance to balance the budget at about 1.5, just shy of 1.5 million. So what happens next is, according to the Act 1 timeline, this is a state requirement, districts or boards are required to approve a proposed final budget. And you need to have at least minimum 30 days in between when you approve the proposed final budget to when you do the final budget adoption, as we have to allow for advertising of the proposed final budget, we have to allow for public inspection of the proposed final budget. So in order to meet those deadlines and align them with our current board meeting dates, as well as hopefully be able to get the tax bills out as of July 1, that would have the board approve a proposed final budget at our upcoming meeting on April 25th, and then a final budget on June 13th. So what we are showing this evening, unless there's recommendations to make changes, this is the recommended proposed final budget that we would like to be able to put together for the board to approve at the upcoming April 25th meeting. Keep in mind, we can make any and all changes between now and the final budget. So we are not limited or restricted to make any changes to the proposed final budget. So we can continue to have those discussions, monitor economic development, and add in revenues or add in expenditures or take out expenditures. We can make changes to the budget up until when you approve up until you approve a final budget. So then this is just a slide reiterating what I just said, saying when we would like the board to approve a proposed final. If you would not stick with these deadlines, we have to, at the very latest, according to the Act 1 index, approve that at May 31st, which would be a special board meeting, and then we'd have to approve a final budget on June 30th, and again, that would be a special board meeting, and tax bills then would not go out until August 1. That brings us to our closing remarks slide. Our upcoming Budget and Finance meeting at this point is scheduled for May 16th. At that meeting, I definitely know that we will be bringing forth to you our capital projects list that we would ask you to consider taking out a designated fund balance. Those are projects that we do not build into the budget, but we usually ask approval alongside of the budget. I just attended our renewal meeting for our medical rates yesterday. I did not have time to digest that information and add that into the budget that was presented this evening. I will say that there was a slight reduction from what I budgeted to the final rates. Again, I can't tell you the dollar amount. I can just tell you at this point, the medical rate that was certified for renewal, there will be a 5.44% increase. And I can't remember off the top of my head if I put 6 or 6.5% in, but I believe I budgeted a little bit higher, so we'll be able to back some money out of the budget. And then we just recently settled on our natural gas contracts, so I'm waiting for information from our consortium. They will give me a budget based on the new rates. So based on those rates, I can tell you that they are lower than what they were for the current year. So I will be able to hopefully be able to budget a reduction as that as well. But again, natural gas rates is not only based on our rate, but based on our consumption. So I'll have to wait till I get that information from our consortium provider.
Christie, the last time, the packet that I got at the last meeting, has there been any changes in like the personnel staffing request? Is everything that was recommended then still recommended now?
That's correct.
Okay.
And those can always be changed moving forward. Again, adoption of the proposed final budget is just that. It's really a preliminary, I hate to use that word, I know Christie doesn't like me to call it a preliminary budget, but we can make changes to it after April 25th.
And just one comment. Nobody knows what the right number really should be in this cyber charter, and I think in a multi-year plan, is it possible to get back that? Is it more reasonable in multi-years to get back, save that 1.2 million? Just looking at the increments, I think in the first year, an aggressive number would be 700. But if I were doing it, that's what I'd do. I'd put a reduction of 700, a projection of reduction of 700 in the cyber charter instead of 1.2, and that takes your deficit back to 2 as a starting place, but
That would make me feel more comfortable, too.
that's what I would do.
Just to throw this out to board members, would you be okay with leaving the 1.2 million in for the proposed final budget? And then that'll give us a little bit more time, a little bit more thought, we can adjust that between then and the final budget?
Okay.
Sounds reasonable.
I mean, nobody knows.
Right.
The reality is that, the reality is that to the extent we miss this number, we've underestimated what the real deficit was, and that money's coming right out of fund balance. And so, but, sure, I would, but nobody knows what the number should be. It's all a projection based on putting a plan together and executing the plan to, so sure.
Understood. Board members, are you comfortable with, and I'm not asking for a vote, but at this point, are you comfortable with the numbers as they are in the taxation to the index that would appear on the proposed final budget for April 25th as presented?
Don's shaking his head, yes, I am.
And again, I know we've said it, but I'll say it again. Whatever we approve on April 25th, we can make adjustments to that before we have a final budget adoption. Okay. Mr. President, I believe that concludes our presentation this evening. Christie, do you have anything else that you want to?
I do not. Just if we're going to go into executive session, I guess announce.
Yes.
Motion adjourned.
Mr. President, before you do that, just to announce, I had mentioned earlier about an executive session immediately following tonight's meeting for, I have to look at it.
And I do have a couple of additional comments.
Go ahead.
As a part of the Budget and Finance Committee process, I'd like for us to consider putting together a plan that relates to fund balance, to address and have a plan in place for how we will be prepared to add the 4 teacher positions in the middle school once the 6 classrooms are built. Part 2 of that is to address what I'm going to call the COVID hangover or the ESSER hangover from the positions that we're currently, recurring positions that we're currently funding from the ESSER money. Now, if we just talk conceptually a little bit, I'm going to give an example, but it's really only meant to be conceptual. It's just a way to explain what I really mean. If we could take a look at fund balance and perhaps recast some area of fund balance to set that money aside to be prepared for the teachers. One possible way, because it was closely related to salaries and exactly for related payroll expenses, would be the category that the PCERS money is in. I know we talked about other possibilities for that. It really wouldn't matter so much which bucket of money it was set aside from. But for example, we wouldn't need those teacher positions in this budget, but in the very next teacher budget we would. And so what we could do if we assume a teacher and all the related payroll costs, we could get that number, but for ease of talking, I'm going to assume that's $100,000. If, for example, we set aside money, earmark the money to fund all 4 teachers' positions in that first year, which would be the very next budget year, and then dropping that to 3, and then 2, and then 1 teacher funded from the fund balance category while they were being onboarded onto the budget. So in a 5-year process, we would wean ourselves from fully funding those positions out of the fund balance to fully funding them or onboarding them onto the budget in some sort of a plan conceptually like that. And then the same thing with ESSER funds, and we can have a separate discussion about that. We certainly had a recent presentation about it, but I need refreshed on the number of positions. Is it 6.5 positions?
It is.
That we're currently, recurring positions that we're currently funding for. Same story, second verse. We need a little plan for how we're gonna fund the 4 teachers at the middle school. We need a little plan on how we're gonna wean ourselves off from the ESSER funding on these positions. And I think recasting some of our fund balance and putting and earmarking that and weaning ourselves off fund balance and back to the budget would be a smart plan. Coming up with the money to fund 10 and a half positions at one time is gonna have a little shock and awe effect, I'm afraid, to the people that'll be sitting here in another year or 2.
I agree, Mr. Barton, and one suggestion that haven't brought forth but been thinking of is as we move through the rest of this budget season and head toward the budget, the final budget, depending on where things are with the governor's budget, I may have come to you and recommended that we actually insert one of those open positions, at least one, within the current budget, fund it, knowing that we're not going to have to pay for it, but then that sort of starts to build it in. But we can have those conversations moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Just to keep in mind, the new assistant middle school principal is being paid out of fund balance too. Or not fund balance, sorry, ESSER funds. So when you were talking about your fund balance plan.
Thank you.
All right, so once again, Mr. President, immediately following this meeting, we will have an executive session regarding legal and personnel matters.
Done? Now I can do adjournment. We gonna make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Adjourn.